The story of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to China. In fact, even as trade and investment are high on Prime Minister Narendra Modi's agenda in China, what he is also doing is showcasing cultural ties between the two sides. In fact, the Prime Minister has definitely ensured that a cultural bond between India and China is fairly demonstrated during this three-day visit to China.
With us is former ambassador of China to India, Mr. Yo Gang. And in fact, he was an ambassador in India at a very crucial time in 1999 period when India conducted its nuclear test. Welcome, Mr. Gang.
The ongoing visit by your Prime Minister Narendra Modi is of great importance for further improving and deepening our strategic partnership. I think he is welcomed by the Chinese leaders as well as the Chinese government. Xi'an, not only the hometown of President Xi Jinping, but also used to be the start point of the Silk Route in ancient times. And in the city, the great monk Xi'an is well known in India during his pilgrimage to India. You see, the China-India border issue is left by history. It's very complicated because it covers a large territory. It's very sensitive to both of us. But I think the leaders of China and India always attach great importance for early resolving of this issue in the spirit take and give, which will be fair and acceptable to both of us. But painting the final solution, I think it is very important for us to maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas. I think it's quite difficult to set up the route. I think the two sides still have some differences over this issue. I think more importantly is to improve the mechanisms.
Right.
Yeah, to resolve the matters which may come up in the future.
Right.
The important is for us to take the issue from the strategic perspective.
Right.
Not let it stand on the way of further development of our relations.
Right.
I think the two leaders and the two governments want to accelerate the phase of resolving this issue.
Well, our political editor Navika Kumar is joining in from Delhi now. Navika, the atmospherics are all in place, protocols have been broken, but realistically, are you expecting anything much to move forward during this visit?
Well, it's a very strategic manner in which India is looking at its ties with China. India is looking at making a strategic move in this region, while India is looking at the Bangla-China, India-Myanmar corridor to make a statement in the near future to distract attention away from the China-Pakistan engagement that's happening on the Silk Road. But issues really of boundary talks is something that India and China talks have always stumbled upon. This time around, what we do understand is going to be the approach of the Indian side is to keep the basic minimum understanding on those issues, but move forward on economic issues. Remember, the Prime Minister is addressing the economic community, the industry in two parts, in Beijing as well as in Shanghai. He's broken away from protocol, gone to Xi'an, brought around some homebound bonhomie between Xi Jinping and himself, just as Xi Jinping had done when his visit to India had happened in September last year. So all the atmospherics there, but trade and investment crucial for India because at the moment China occupies nearly 14% imports, the entire imports of India from all over the world, the non-oil imports, and that's a trade balance which is in favor of China. India would like to really look at that being improved in the coming months and years, and that is something that's going to dictate the agenda for Prime Minister Narendra Modi during his talks. So structured talks currently underway, and after this the wild goose pagoda is where the two leaders are going to be headed. It's the unstructured talks and what is exchanged in those talks that will be the more crucial part of this engagement between India and China. How do you see the structured talks really going ahead? You know, there'll be a few pre-decided issues that will be on the agenda. There are the 12 government-to-government agreements that are on the agenda, which will be, you know, part of the structured level talks. Information on rivers sharing, all of that will be part of the structured talks. But what do you expect at the Wild Goose Pagoda, where the two leaders are you know, spending an hour together? It's away from the officials. Do you expect, you know, that meeting to hold more significance in this leg of the Prime Minister's China trip? That question goes to you, Ambassador Chakravarti.
Well, I think the walkabout, if that is what is planned at the Wild Goose Pagoda, is going to be something similar to what happened at the memorial in Washington, where Obama and Modi did a walkabout. And I think that will be a good opportunity for them to raise issues.
Okay, if I can just interrupt you for a minute there. Those are live. This is the visuals from the morning when the Prime Minister really visited the Dajiangshan temple. And these are visuals of that structured level talks. Yes, Ambassador Chakravarti.
Yes, as you can see, the structured talks are going on with the President. And just as Prime Minister Modi went out of his way, broke protocol and received the President in Gujarat, I think President Xi Jinping is now returning the compliment and receiving him, and has received him in Xi'an, and also having talks with him. And in the talks itself, I think the harder issues will be there. There are predetermined agreements that I think about the value of about 10 billion that will be signed. These are commercial agreements. But then the issue of the border will remain, the issue of terrorism, the issue of Afghanistan, and what is happening in Pakistan. All this terrorism is directly linked to what is happening in Pakistan. I think India and China do share a common understanding on how to deal with terrorism, but then China has a lot at stake in Pakistan with its overall policy of helping Pakistan. But then India also has the Act East policy, where we are trying to build connectivity to the east, right up to ASEAN and Vietnam. So there are a lot of issues at stake. Bilaterally, the trade issue will also hog a lot of time because of the trade imbalance that we have. But then the investments, to balance it out, I think Chinese investments will come into India in certain sectors. With railways is there, infrastructure mainly, railways, and then industrial parks and other things.
Those are visuals coming from the Wild Goose Pagoda in Xi'an, where the Prime Minister Narendra Modi is visiting, and will have a 1 hour round around that pagoda with President Xi Jinping. Those are visuals coming to you live from Xi'an, where Prime Minister Narendra Modi is now, after the structured talks with the Chinese president, headed to that pagoda. In fact, the two leaders with their translator together at this point in time, alone, without the officials. It is at this level that we expect some more bonhomie to be exchanged between the two sides. Remember, the two leaders have also met in September last year, when they spent time together on the banks of the Sabarmati river, when in September President Xi Jinping visited Ahmedabad. Now Prime Minister Narendra Modi reciprocating that entire bonhomie, and President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi at this moment taking that walk around the Wild Goose Pagoda.
Okay, the meeting lasted about 90 minutes. And in fact, it was the first, President Xi said it was the first time he was meeting a foreign leader outside Beijing. It was very wide-ranging, very detailed. Various aspects of bilateral, regional, global issues were discussed. It was very substantive, and I would say the atmosphere was very comfortable. So in a sense, it was building on the chemistry between the two of them, which started last September. Now, I'll give you a quick readout of the issues which came up, and then we'll discuss it tomorrow. On the political side, there was a lot of discussion on strengthening trust and increasing convergence. Political issues were discussed, boundary issues were discussed, including peace and tranquility on the border. Trans-border rivers was discussed. On the economic side, the trade deficit and the investment climate These were two issues which came up. There was some discussion on the challenges of reforms. And President Xi spoke of the miracle of Gujarat under Prime Minister, and now the fact that he was trying to now do it at a national level. There was some time spent on discussing connectivity issues and finding ways of India and China working together. Then terrorism naturally came up because of today's incident in Kabul. There's a reference to that and to the attack in Karachi. And the need to strengthen counter-terrorism cooperation between India and China. There was also the issue of CCIT, the Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism, that was mentioned on our side. Then there was some talk of Nepal, what India and China had, how India and China had responded to the earthquake situation in Nepal, and also to Maldives when they had that problem with water. In terms of international issues, UN Security Council reform came up, and India's NSG membership came up. So these were the sort of the highlights of the discussion, the issues which really came up today, and I'll give you a much more detailed readout tomorrow. Thank you.